to get further. Whereas when it comes to deciding on investment in the globalization context, so deciding how much or when you should invest as a company when looking at a globalization strategy and looking at global markets, things are a little bit different. Because you are never in your own environment, because you never really feel that comfortable like in your own business environment, so you don't have that fast a very high comfort zone. It takes time. You take much longer time, you are much more cautious, you are much more careful, you do not tend to invest that heavily into areas you don't know. So the pattern is slightly different. But looking at the globalization investment strategy requires a very stable approach. It requires to be very cautious. It requires a long-term commitment. So this is also what needs to know. So for Chinese companies looking at globalization and getting out of the door and getting out of your own environment also poses the challenge of looking at the different landscape and trying to find different investment modes. So it requires also diversification of your investment capabilities. And here again, when you have Chinese companies at the beginning being very cash rich, having a lot of liquidity, and thinking about, oh, I can buy anything, I just need to invest, then this is not the right strategy to being successful in the long run. Looking at Europe, going a little bit further into the European market, now looking at the distribution of Chinese investment, we have seen now that on the one side that it's been interesting looking at overseas investment in China and European investment in China against Chinese investment overseas and against Chinese investment in Europe. So we see that especially from the time of financial crisis in Europe, the landscape for Chinese investors and Chinese enterprises has changed with regards to Europe. So Chinese enterprises are trying to get more and more into the European market. And they have more and more confidence in the European market. And they see a long-term commitment being quite promising for them with regards to the European market. Now, what does it mean? Now, looking at the distribution of investment destinations in Europe, here again it's the traditional markets. So Chinese companies, in the past they didn't really know about Europe. Well, of course they looked at the size because of the products they were offering. So mainly it was getting into Europe at the beginning. For Chinese it was very much about selling off mass products, cheap products. So you need big markets. So you very much focus on those markets which either are logistically very comfortable because you have to bring in your things from China, from the manufacturing basis. And on the other side, of course, you have to look at the size of the market. So taking a look at the main investment destinations of Chinese foreign direct investment in Europe, in the European member countries, we see the cumulative total investment in million US dollars from 2000 to 2011. So it's 11 year period. Now, we have to look at that investment from two different standpoints. So the first thing is, it's the total investment. And the others would be, of course, the investment form or who is investing. Now, if it's according to total investment, we have the main countries where Chinese enterprises focus on would be traditional countries in Central Europe. So it would be France, we have England, we have Germany, and we have Sweden. So those places we see here, so this would be the value of million US dollars being very dark. Overseas Chinese investment would be highest. So we see that overseas Chinese foreign direct investment in Europe very much focuses and still does on those countries. What's the reason? The reason is, first, it's big countries. It's very big markets. You have the main trading partners in Europe. You have China, you have Germany, you have France, you have England. And of course, you have very high level of foreign investment and foreign invested companies in China coming from those areas. If you look at the number of transactions, so not the total investment, but how was that investment distributed? How many investment projects were that? Then the situation looks like this. Then we see that looking at the number of investments, number one would be in Germany. So looking at the total investments, we can understand that the biggest amount of foreign direct investment from China came into France. However, if you look at that figure again, and we try to understand what does this really mean, when we look at projects that were really handled, the number one would clearly be Germany. So which is Chinese companies did not have to use that much investment to obtain a different amount of investment projects in Germany like in France. Or meaning that investments in projects in France have been per project much, much higher and required a much higher level of direct investment than those projects in Germany. Well, you see, this is that Chinese did not invest that big amounts in single projects in Germany as they did in France. Again, looking at the number of transactions, number two would be England. So this is very interesting. England shows a very, very good balance between the amount that was actually invested and the number of projects that investment went into. Number three here would be France again. So France, even though she obtained the highest amount of Chinese investment, it does not represent so many projects. So investment of Chinese in France was very much focused on very big projects, which required very high level of net investment. Then the transactions being done in the Netherlands are the lowest number. But since we don't see the Netherlands here, it shows that a lot of small investments by Chinese went into the Netherlands, and it was mainly like trading companies or the like. So Netherlands, they are quite a good location for Chinese companies when it comes to doing a lot of different projects. But they don't really invest such big amounts in single projects. This does not work that way. Looking now a step further into Chinese investment in Europe. We've just had a look at the countries, so various distributions of countries where Chinese direct investment